Hi, everybody. I'm going to do my best to do a short introduction to global citizenship. I'm recovering from flu. It's been 3 weeks now. So I've got a bit of a croaky voice and a bit of a cough, but I'm going to do my best. I've had a few questions. I've got a live lesson starting this week, small group covering global citizenship, with the aim to take the exam in May 2026. I personally think that that's the perfect amount of time to cover the course thoroughly and to give time for revision and to carry out the community action project. I'm not going to spend long on any of these first slides. I've just started out when I did my first introduction on why one might want to study citizenship. And there's so many reasons. Obviously, it helps us to become more responsible global citizens, think about our identity, think about rights and freedoms, the role of the media. What I love most about it is very current, it's very up to date, and obviously it's very, very relevant. What does it involve? Well, there are four key themes and a community action project. It's the project that puts people off, but honestly, it's not that challenging and it's actually really enjoyable. The students that I've had have really quite enjoyed carrying it out. Good news if you don't like lots of exams, there's one exam paper only, but it is 2.5 hours long. But having said that, a lot of the questions are based on a source piece of information, a bit like comprehension and multi-choice, and there's only a couple of long answer questions. And it's all about reflecting on what is a global citizenship. So it's about diversity, it's about globalization, it's about the different international organizations like the World Health Organization, the UN, etc. Now I'm going to whiz through these. You need to be interested in politics and citizenship, I would suggest, and be able to consider a wide range of views. Now, somebody's asked me, is it suitable for an 11-year-old? Well, there are 11-year-olds that would cope very well with it, and there are 11-year-olds that wouldn't. I think you need to be reasonably mature. And again, this is down to the individual. And you've got to be able to do a 15-mark essay question. But I give a formula for those. Once we get into the course, I teach how to answer those questions in order to do well. And you need to be able to consider a range of views. So the exam requires that you give what they call a balanced viewpoint. It might not be your own viewpoint. You might have a strong viewpoint one way or another, but you do need to be able to present the other side. And you need to present a blended answer. So this is knowledge, application, and evaluation. And this is one of the skills that students struggle with the most and really requires just getting your head around, think about every point you make, you're going to state it, apply it to a real life situation, and then evaluate the impact of it, all the different viewpoints. But again, I teach that through the course. So this is the specification information. It's a Pearson Edexcel. It's a 100-mark exam. Now, the really good news is the project is 20 marks out of that 100. So how does that work? Well, during the course, we take some time out and just focus on the project. I have very set templates that I share with the students that I expect them to follow. We discuss as a group on Zoom in a normal lesson what kind of projects they could do. If you're doing it part of the live lessons, or if you're doing it as distance learning, you're going to come up with ideas and then check with me that they fit, because they've got to fit into one of the four themes. Once you've done that, there's a template that I've worked on alongside the exam paper materials, the examination board materials rather, to enable you to follow it step by step. Now, these projects can be done in the community locally where you live, or they can be done online if necessary. Locally, it can be better because it's sometimes easier to set up and get the feedback that you need. But during COVID, we had no choice but to do them online. So once that project is done, you basically answer questions on it in the exam. So they can be prepared in advance. The students will have written out answers to all of the questions that have ever been published on the project. And there's a limited amount that they can ask. So really the good thing is you go into the exam knowing those first 20 marks you're going to do very well on because you've pre-prepared it. So just to go through some of the themes very quickly, we've got politics and government. And we talk about democracy, state and sovereignty, systems of governments and different types of governments, human rights and international law and all the main international organizations. So things like the strengths and weaknesses, the Human Development Index. These are just some example slides. Human rights. So with citizenship, it's really important to have some case studies. And I look at some that are well known, like the Shabina Begum, but also some, more recent ones. We then look at economic development and the environment. So this is a crossover with environmental management, if any of you have studied that. We look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We look at fair trade. During lessons, if you do the live lessons, we might have a debate. People don't have to speak out loud. If they're not keen on that, they can type in the chat and I'll share the ideas that are coming forward. And what I would normally say with this is put your name on the scale. So I would get students to put an initial where they are on the scale of strongly agree to strongly disagree on climate change as the greatest threat faced by the global community. And encourage them to start saying, in my opinion, this, however, or on the other hand, blah, 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 blah. This is good practice for the exam. So it might be then we work out a for and against and our judgment, and then we'd work on writing the essay after that. So it's all very scaffolded learning. Culture and the community, global and national cultures, identity and migration, social attitudes and changing lifestyles, global language and communication, and emerging economies. So we start out looking at identity, and this is just one of the slides that looks at what it means to be British, for example. And then we think about cultural globalization and how things are changing, and think about, are we resistant or are we very diverse in the UK, for example? We might compare that with another country such as Japan. Technology is about technology and economic development, communities, politics, and climate change. And then we look at social media identities and freedoms. Most of my students love this the most. It's the last topic. You've done a lot of the hard work learning about the UN, for example, and their role and stuff like that. And then with technology, it's all very up to date and things that they're interested in. So you talk about artificial intelligence, how technology is used in elections, technology and energy efficiency, so carbon capture and storage, etc. But this is the thing I wanted to talk to you about the most, and I don't want to take up much of your time, and I'm conscious I'm going to start coughing any minute. So the project, the Citizenship Community Action. Now, all our GCSEs in citizenship or GCSEs have a project. The Global Citizenship Project is the only one I'm aware of that is easy for home educators because it doesn't need a tutor to do it. You don't need to have it signed off by somebody for the exam board. Okay? All you do is carry it out as part of your everyday course, and then in the exam, you answer questions on it. Now, the project itself, I don't think is that challenging, but it is challenging to get the students to come up with the right question to ask, the right thing to cover. It must be part of the themes, it must be within one of the themes, and it needs to show an impact either locally, nationally, or globally. Now, look, we're a handful of home educated students. You're not going to make a massive impact, but you do need to have made some, and you need to show that you've made some because you're going to answer questions on this in the exam. So it might be you do a pre-questionnaire and a post-questionnaire and you get people to fill it out. Then you present them with something like a presentation of PowerPoint or a slideshow or leaflets or whatever. And then you do another questionnaire and you go, look, I've changed their opinion. So it might be on migrants, for example. My first group did migrants. Oh no, my first group did plastic waste in the oceans, and they were spread out all over the country. And I had students in Dubai at that point. But we all worked on it together online, and they did it then locally in their own areas or online together. The other group had a couple of girls who wanted to do the sexualization of women in the Olympics and look at the this was when there were some women in the Olympics refusing to wear the leotards and saying we want to wear full leggings, for example. And we looked at journalism and how that, because this was under media, we looked at how the journalism and photographs of women in the Olympics were different to how they were taken of men, and how that was very sexualized, etc. So that was just what they'd come up with, and they did a huge amount of work on it and did really well with it. So it's really wide-reaching what you can do. I would strongly advise that you check it out with somebody that knows the exam, like myself, to make sure that you're on the right tracks, because the key thing is that they're asked questions about it in the exam, and they've got to draw on knowledge and understanding from across the course. So here's some ideas. Taking action to help newly arrived international refugees to learn English. So then you would be definitely having an impact, wouldn't you? But you've got to think about safety, of safeguarding. You've got to, then parents are going to need to be involved, thinking about how you're going to manage that and how you're going to do it and how you could widen the impact. Helping reduce local food wastage. Well, that's an easy one for me because I used to run the community fridge here where I live. But, researching why it's important, raise awareness of recycling and food waste. You could do a talk in schools. So when my daughter took this, she and her friend took it years and years ago. She was only young, actually. And they did a project in a primary school. So I used to teach in primary school. So I got in touch with the local primary school. And what we did was send them a questionnaire to do with a class of children. She actually did the whole, I think, of Key Stage 2 assembly. And we sent them a questionnaire that they printed out and gave out to the children before, what they knew about migrants and refugees. Then we did an assembly for the school, which I led because I was happy to, and the girls didn't particularly want to. But they did some of the practical activities as part of the assembly with the rest of the children. And then they redid the questionnaire. So that way you can show the impact, can't you? Because you're changing the minds of children about the lives refugees have and the risks they've taken to get here, for example. And at that time, when we did it, there was the refugee crisis. Well, there still probably is, really, isn't there? So look, food wastage. It could be putting pressure on the local council. Somebody I was working with did reducing single-use plastic, and they emailed Sainsbury's or Morrison's or wherever to try and have an impact. So there's all sorts of things you can do. Investigating and campaigning on the global issue of modern slavery. Now, that's a tough one, and I would shy away from that, in my view. These are some of the ideas that the exam board comes up with, but it's a serious crime, and you're not going to want to tackle it with victims and criminals, are you? It's about raising awareness, maybe, and looking at what forms it can take. But something like this would be hard to show an impact. You can say that your impact is that you've raised awareness of it. So you could do a questionnaire saying, are you aware that modern slavery still exists in the UK? And they could say no, and then you could talk to them, and then you could say, now you're aware. So your impact doesn't have to be huge. They accept that these are just ordinary, students carrying out these actions, but you do have to show that you've made an impact. So you need to have some sort of data to analyze. Now, when we did it online, we used SurveyMonkey. It does limit you to do it for free. It limits you to 10 questions and limits you to the kind of questions you can ask. But it is a good way to show an impact, and it does do the statistics for you. During COVID, when we had to do it, the girls I was working with did a presentation on refugees, and they put the PowerPoint, they each did a part of the PowerPoint. I put it all together, and then I ran a webinar online and invited people to it through my Facebook pages. And then we asked some questions before and afterwards to show the impact. So that there are ways around it. Another young man did plastic waste in his local community, and he was really into media and videoing and stuff. So he did a video advertising a local farm shop that used less plastic. There's lots of things we can do. Another one, raising local awareness of the importance of improved sanitation for low-income countries. So it's about picking a topic from the themes that we study and thinking about what you could do to raise awareness or make an improvement in that area. I hope this is making sense. There's lots of support for the students during this. Um, we you can do it individually or you can do it as part of a group. When I've run it before, depending on the size of the group, some have chosen to go off on their own and others have worked together as a team because that way you're sharing research because you do need to be able to do some primary research and some secondary research online, but it doesn't need to be mammoth, literally 3 websites, and you need to say what you've gained from them. And I've got templates for all of these things. So I would set a piece of work which said, right, this is the area we're going to do. Go and find evidence that this is a useful thing for us to do. So for plastic waste, it was find out how plastic waste impacts the environment. Or it might be find out about the refugee crisis in the UK and attitudes towards refugees. So one group studied newspapers, for example. So one girl said, well, I'm going to look at newspaper reports and look at how refugees are perceived in newspapers, in the tabloids particularly. Another went to a refugee centre and found out how they were working with refugees there. Another looked at the statistics of journeys and how people had left and the kind of things that they'd struggled with along the way. Another looked at successful refugees in the UK. So they picked famous refugees that had come here years ago and become very successful, or people that had come as a refugee and were now at Cambridge or Oxford or in London studying medicine or whatever. So there's tons of support around it. And I think it's a really, really worthwhile thing to do. So I hope that's helpful. I'm not on best form, but I hope it's been a useful start. And any questions, put them in the comments below.